When you look at a map of India, it feels, well, permanent, right? It seems totally set in stone. But what if I told you that the Indian Constitution has a built-in eraser, a power that lets Parliament redraw the lines of any state it wants? Today, we're going to get into the incredible story of how India's map was drawn, and just as importantly, how it's still being redrawn.
Seriously, think about it. We see this map all the time, and it feels so solid, so final. But the borders separating these states are, believe it or not, far from fixed. The story of how this map even came to be is this amazing tale of politics, language, and the very idea of what India is.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what the Constitution means by a union of states. Then, we'll uncover the mind-blowing power Parliament has to just change the map. After that, we'll travel back to the massive reorganization in the 1950s, and finally, we'll see how this whole process is still happening today.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, with the foundation. The Indian Constitution, in Article 1, describes India not as a federation, but as a union of states. Now, that might sound like just a choice of words, but it was a deliberate, calculated decision with huge consequences. You see, this exact phrasing was pushed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was heading the drafting committee. He chose Union of States for two really big reasons. First, he wanted to make it crystal clear that the Indian Federation wasn't some kind of deal where states agreed to join up. And second, and this is the big one, it meant that no state has the right to just leave. The Union itself is indestructible.
Now, this is totally different from a place like the United States. The U.S. is often called an indestructible union of indestructible states. What that means is the federal government over there can't just change a state's borders without its permission. But in India, it's a whole different ballgame. While the union is indestructible, the states themselves, well, they're very much destructible.
And here's another key detail. The territory of India is actually a much bigger idea than just the Union of India. It covers the states, sure, but it also includes union territories, which are run directly by the central government and any land that India might acquire down the line. This broad definition is super important for understanding just how far Parliament's power goes. So, if the states are destructible, who gets to do the destroying, or at least the redrawing? Well, it all comes down to a couple of articles in the Constitution that basically hand Parliament a constitutional eraser.
And this is where the magic happens. Article 3. This one article is the source of the central government's ultimate power over the country's internal map. It gives Parliament 5 distinct powers. You could almost call them 5 superpowers.
And here they are. Parliament can literally create a new state from an old one. It can make a state bigger, or it can make it smaller. It can change a state's borders, or, just decide to change its name. It's the whole shebang. They hold all the cards when it comes to reshaping the country's political geography. Now, you'd think a process this powerful would be super complicated, but honestly, it's pretty simple. A bill needs the president's okay to even be introduced. Then, it's sent to the state legislature involved so they can give their opinion. But here's the kicker. Parliament doesn't have to listen to them at all. Whether the state says yes or no, Parliament can go ahead and pass the law with just a simple majority. And all of this brings us to the one phrase that just perfectly sums up Indian federalism: an indestructible union of destructible states. The country as a whole can't be broken apart, but the individual states that make it up, they have absolutely no guarantee that their borders or even their existence are permanent.
Okay, so we've got the theory down. Now let's see this power in action. Right after independence, India's map was a real mess, a patchwork of old British provinces and princely states. And there was this huge demand to redraw the whole thing, mostly based on language. At first, the government was really against the idea. In 48 and 49, 2 major committees basically said no, let's not use language, it could break the country apart. But the public pressure just kept building. It all came to a head in 1953 with the creation of Andhra for Telugu speakers, but only after massive protests. That one event changed everything. It basically opened the floodgates, leading directly to the States Reorganization Act of 1956.
The group that recommended this big overhaul, the Fazla Ali Commission, was actually pretty clever about it. They said, okay, language is important, we get it. But they rejected a simple one language, one state rule. They insisted that any changes also had to think about national unity, whether the new state could actually afford to exist, and the well-being of the people. It was this balanced approach that gave us the first modern map of India. But the story didn't just stop in 1956. Oh no, not by a long shot. That was really just the beginning of this continuous process.
The map of India has been changing ever since. I mean, just 4 years later, in 1960, protests in the bilingual state of Bombay led to it being split in two. The result? 2 brand new states, each based on language. Maharashtra for Marathi speakers and Gujarat for Gujarati speakers.
Then jump to 1966. The demand for a Punjabi-speaking state led to a total reorganization of Punjab. The new state of Haryana was created for Hindi speakers, and their shared capital, Chandigarh, became its own little thing, a union territory run by the center.
Let's fast forward to the year 2000. 3 massive states were divided up, mainly for better governance and to recognize unique regional identities. And just like that, we got Chhattisgarh from Madhya Pradesh, Uttarakhand from Uttar Pradesh, and Jharkhand from Bihar.
And then in 2014, after decades and decades of struggle, Telangana was carved out of Andhra Pradesh, which, if you remember, was the very first state created on a linguistic basis. It really shows you this cycle of reorganization just keeps on going.
And it's not just about the borders. Remember that 5th superpower? Changing names. This has happened all the time as states shed their old or colonial names to better reflect their culture. Think about Madras becoming Tamil Nadu, or more recently, Orissa becoming Odisha.
Which brings us to the most recent and probably the most dramatic change. In 2019, Parliament used its powers under Article 3 to completely reorganize the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Its special status was gone, and the state itself was split into 2 new union territories. It was an incredible demonstration that this constitutional erasure is just as powerful today as it was back in the 1950s.
So we end right back where we started, but now with a totally new way of seeing things. The map of India isn't some static, dusty document. It's a living thing, always subject to change by a simple act of Parliament. And that leaves us with a pretty deep question. In an indestructible union made of truly destructible states, what does the word permanent even mean?